Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I am your host as always, Stan McCune. I am a realtor here in the Greenville area of South Carolina, and you can find all of my contact information in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs. And just a reminder as always, please leave this show a 5-star rating if you're using an app that allows you to do that, such as particularly the Apple Podcast app, which the vast majority of you guys that are listening are using that app. So I know that you can leave me a 5-star review. Please do that. Please, if you can type up a short little review that just kind of says what value you get out of the show, I would appreciate that as well. And of course, really the only thing, at least so far, that I get out of this show personally is real estate business, because I am a realtor. So if you need a realtor here in the Greenville area, or you know someone that does, please send them my way. Reach out to me. All my contact information is there in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs. One thing that I have said to you guys in the past that I'm going to reiterate is a lot of the content for my show starts out in my mind as a question. I operate under the assumption that if there is something that I am interested in or a question that I have, it's probably something that my listeners are interested in, or a question that at least some of them have. And a lot of these questions stem from trying to piece together or trying to figure out some of the things that are not reflected in the monthly statistics that the Greater Greenville Association of Realtors releases. They release some really fantastic information, some great data that I pretty much go over every month with you guys, but there are some things that they don't discuss. And probably the thing that I wish that they had in there the most that they don't is information on price reductions. And that is really a big topic right now, and a major thing that I'm interested in right now, because obviously we are seeing a lot of price reductions. And in addition to seeing a lot of price reductions, we're also seeing, as I discussed when we went over the monthly statistics last month, we're seeing a lot fewer offers that are above list price, and substantially more offers and substantially more contracts that are below list price. Well, what's interesting is that the monthly statistics that GGAR produces, even when it's looking at the list price to sale price percentage, which tells us how much lower the contract price is versus the list price, that isn't even accounting for price reductions, because they only look at the most recent list price. So there's just a lot of different important aspects to the data that's out there that is directly tied into price reductions. And I started with the question in my mind, how many price reductions are we seeing right now, and how does that compare historically to what we have seen in the market in the past? I just realized I haven't turned off my phone, so I'm going to turn on Do Not Disturb. Okay, all right. Because if I don't, you guys will just be hearing phone calls the entire time and text messages the entire time I'm doing this show. That's my life as a realtor. All right. So here's what I did. I went into the multiple listing service, MLS, and I pulled all of the sold properties from basically May through October of 2022, then through November 21st through November of 2021 through April of 2022, so the 6 months prior to that, then May through October of 2021, then November 2020 through April 2021, and then I did the entire year of 2019. Now, I intentionally left off the beginning of the pandemic because that was just such a weird time. Like, if I did that stretch from, if I kept this consistent and did, like I said, that pandemic period of time, immediately, May through October of 2020, or even before that, we would just have a lot of really wonky data. So I intentionally left that out. But I wanted to go do the entire year of 2019 because we can safely say that was pre-pandemic. Things were, quote unquote, normal back then, back in 2019. And so we need to compare to all of that stuff. And so I took all of those different periods of time and broke down how it's actually quite simple to do this in MLS because they have the original list price and then the most recent list price and then the sold price. And so I can actually see based on what the original price was and then what the final list price was. And I don't even, for this study, I didn't even have to look at the sold price, but I can look at how many price reductions there were. Now, what I didn't do is I didn't clean up this data because there's going to be a lot of scenarios where realtors that don't know what they're doing enter listings incorrectly into MLS. Example, there were several that I saw where someone entered, for instance, a $198,000 house for $198 million, and then they had to reduce the price by oodles and oodles in order to get it back down to $198,000. I started running some other analysis on this to try to figure out different averages and medians and whatnot, and just found that things were just getting really out of hand because of the realtors that had incorrectly listed things and added extra zeros at the end, which then bumped those listings up. I operated under the assumption that is just going to happen, and it's going to happen regularly, fairly consistently across all of these different sets of data. And so I didn't scrub it free of all of those. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I looked at all of these different periods of time to see what we have been seeing in terms of price reductions. And here's what we saw. In 2019, and this is actually a higher number than I expected. In 2019, 32% of listings saw a price reduction. So almost exactly a third of properties of homes, that was what I was specifically looking at, was single family homes that were sold had price reductions. Again, it's pretty straightforward. Basically, 1 out of every 3 properties that listed on the market at some point had to reduce its price. Now, obviously, during the pandemic, that number went way, way down. We can already see that in the November 2020 through April 2021 data set, because that number went all the way down to 20.81% for that period of time. In May through October 2021, that number went to the lowest of all of my data set that I have here. It went down to 12.86%. So during the most insane time that we have to track here, 12.86% of listings had a price reduction at some point. So a little bit more than 1 out of 10. That stayed very low for my November 21 through April 2022 data set. 15.64% of listings had a price reduction during that period of time. And then May through October of this year, that number hopped back up to what it was back in November 2020 through April 2021, basically 20%. It was 19.88%. So still much lower than 2019, right? Maybe. Again, remember, I was looking, I actually failed to mention this, but I filtered all of this by sold properties, which didn't really matter for the properties that were, like a couple of years ago. But for the properties that were the past 6 months, only filtering by the sold properties made a big difference. So I decided for that 6-month period of time, well, let's look at all of the actives and under contract properties as well. And for comparison, the number of listings that were sold for the past 6 months that I came up with from May through October was, at least for these properties I was looking at, was 8,929. The number of active and under contract right now, as of when I pulled this data, was 4,629, which, by the way, huge number, right? Not too long ago, we were looking in the low thousands at properties that were active and under contract. Maybe not low thousands, low 2000s. For actives, it was low thousands. If it was active and under contract, it was low 2000s. So we are basically double, perhaps more than double what it was just 6 months ago when it comes to that. That's a product of what we've talked about, inventory going way up as fewer people are buying, but still a lot of people are selling or trying to sell at least. So what percentage of active and under contract properties have had price reductions? 42.71% of the 4,629 active and under contract properties. 42, almost 43% of them have had a price reduction. That is a massive number. That is it's greater than 10% more than what the 2019 year had. So this is then going to be reflected in the sold data moving forward. If I do this exercise 6 months from now, we will see probably close to 50%, because this number is going to go up, right? Because this number accounts for, there's a lot of active properties that haven't yet reduced their price that are going to have to. And so I suspect that if I do this exercise 6 months from now and I look back, probably about half the listings, half the homes on the market will have had a price reduction. And that does not even account for the number of them that will then have to accept an offer below what their home is listed for. Massive implications for the market. We are seeing tons and tons of price reductions, and I predicted exactly that earlier this year. If you guys were listening to this podcast earlier this year, I said that the market shift would result in a lot of price reductions because people have gotten used to being able to overprice their home and still get it under contract relatively quickly. That norm of being able to overprice your home and still be able to sell it with either no or very few repercussions. I just did a podcast on that specifically. I've done 2 podcasts on overpricing your home the past couple of years. If you're interested, listen to them. But the most recent one that I did showed that there was a major anomaly, which was that overpricing wasn't that big of a deal in the post-pandemic market, or you might say the pandemic real estate market. Now that we are in this new phase of the market, it is returning back to what it normally would be, which is that if you overprice your home, it's going to cause a problem. And what the market is saying, and this is crazy, is that 50% of the homes out there, roughly speaking, are overpriced. That is an insane number. 1 out of 2. It's not quite 1 out of 2. Again, it's closer to 43%. But I'm believing that when it's all said and done, it will be closer to 1 out of 2 properties currently for sale are going to have to experience a price cut. So that is, if you're selling in this market, you have to be prepared for that. You have to understand that this is the market dynamic. And again, I predicted this, that people would get caught, that they would have gotten used to the old norm, not realize what the new norm is, overprice their home, and then realize, oh, this is not going to work anymore. And let me just say for a second, the reason why it worked the past couple of years, and I mentioned this on my podcast a few weeks ago, so I apologize if you're an avid listener and this is a repeat for you. But when you're in a market that's appreciating by, basically 2 to 4% per month, which is what we experienced in a few months. In the past couple of years, we had some months that had that type of appreciation. All you had to do, let's say that you overpriced your home by 5%, all you have to do is wait it out a few months. You might not sell it right away. Again, is that best practice? Perhaps not. If you're wanting to sell quickly, you still shouldn't overprice your home. But if you overprice your home by 5%, all you had to do was wait a few months for the market to catch up, and it would. And then all of a sudden your house is worth what it was listed for, and perhaps you're happy with that. Now that's no longer the case. Even though we are seeing still those year-on-year numbers are still very high in terms of appreciation, things are cooling down, and we are going to see those year-on-year numbers cool down quite a bit because people just have more options now. They have more things to look at. And so if they see a property that's overpriced, they're just like, no, I'm not going to look at it. And remember, that year-on-year appreciation that we look at, when I'm looking at the monthly statistics, that's dealing with sold properties. That's not talking about properties that haven't sold, right? And so the people that are having to reduce the price on their home those are homes that haven't sold yet. So that's not reflected in that data. So when we say that the market has appreciated by 15%, well, it hasn't really. That's actually, I probably need to be more precise. The market hasn't exactly appreciated by 15%. Only sold homes sold for 15% more, right? But there's still all of as the active inventory gets higher and higher and higher, there's still all of these properties that are just sitting that are available. And eventually, once those prices get reduced, once they end up having to sell for less than what it was listed for, we are going to see those year-on-year numbers fall back to reality. That's what I think is going to happen. So all that to say, overpricing, people that overprice their homes are starting to finally see the market do what it normally does, which is to tell them your home is overpriced, it's going to sit, you need to reduce the price. Unfortunately, it's happening to a lot more homes for sale than we normally see, but that's the product of a shifting market. That's the product of, again, people being left out in the cold thinking, oh, my neighbor sold for $350 a month ago. Well, I can list mine for $375. No, maybe that was the case a year ago, that you could do something crazy like that and not be penalized for it. This market currently is penalizing you if you get greedy. I also predicted several months ago that people who were able to get by selling fixer-uppers would no longer be able to when the market shifted. And that's exactly, anecdotally, this data doesn't reflect this per se, but anecdotally I'm seeing this. I'm seeing a lot of these homes that were in desirable areas that are, so let me back up for a second. About a year ago, I had several clients that were just constantly getting outbid in their search for homes. And I'm not just talking about one specific client. I don't have one specific client in mind. I'm just talking, generally speaking, I had a lot of buyer clients that were just getting outbid over and over and over again. What happened when they kept getting outbid, and then, of course, they were up against, the ceiling of what they could afford and all of that, we had to look at fixer-upper properties. We had no other choice because all of the other ones, the properties that weren't fixer-upper properties, were just getting, the prices were just getting pushed up so high. They were just, everyone was putting in offers. They were getting 20, 25 offers. It was crazy. Well, that resulted, as I said, in us then having to go look at fixer-upper properties, and we had no choice. And these are properties that traditionally only investors would have been interested in, would have been looking at. But now we are seeing, and it wasn't just my clients, I knew a lot of other people that had the same thing. They were having retail, just normal first-time home buyer clients having to look at fixer-uppers because there was no other option out there. Well, then those fixer-upper properties would then end up getting multiple offers on them because the inventory was just so low. Well, guess what? Inventory isn't low anymore, and I predicted, again, that this would happen, that those people that could sell fixer-upper properties for retail pricing, that was going to be the demographic that got hit the hardest. Those were going to be the people that traditionally, that was such an anomaly. We had never seen a market where you could just list a fixer-upper property for only a few $1,000s less than a property that needed no work and still be able to sell it. That has gone away. People are not buying houses that need cosmetic updates. They were willing to deal with that a year ago. No longer. They don't need to. There are other options on the market. And so, anecdotally, I've seen a ton of price reductions on properties that need cosmetic updates, that need other sorts of updates. People aren't looking at them. They're not buying them. They have other options that they can work with. And so those properties now are going to have to be priced for investors to purchase them. That is reality right now. And you're not going to be able to sell a fixer-upper unless it's very unique, unless it has some sort of unique appeal that people aren't going to find a non-fixer-upper on the market that's similar to it. Unless it has that, it's just going to sit. And I'm seeing homes right now in very good parts of Greenville County and Spartanburg County and Anderson County as well. And I'll throw Pickens in there because I look at all these different counties. I'm seeing properties in all these different counties that a year ago would have already sold that are just sitting right now because it has gross carpet, it has messed up flooring, it has an ugly kitchen, all of these different things. People could deal with that last year when it was just like, we just need to get a home, we just want to lock in these low interest rates. Now people are just like, nah, we're not going to mess around with that now. We'll either keep looking or we'll go under contract with another house that doesn't need so much work. So that's going to continue to fuel price reductions as well. Another thing I'm seeing is these iBuyers, and I did a podcast episode on the quote-unquote large investment companies that we frequently refer to as iBuyers that, they send out postcards to people to say, hey, your home might be worth $300,000 to $350,000. Why don't you reach out to our team of our acquisitions team, usually what they call it. Why don't you reach out to our acquisitions team and we can get you an exact quote today on what we could buy your house for. We'll make it a quick closing, cash, blah, 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 blah. I did a podcast on them and kind of my opinion on them a few months ago. Well, I'm seeing that a lot of these iBuyers are having to see a ton of price reductions. They're having homes that are just sitting on the market. We're seeing tons of price reductions on their homes. These homes were overpriced to begin with. The work that the iBuyers did to them, the rehab, was not good. The iBuyers are hard to work with, and they also aren't paying buyer agent commissions that everyone else is paying. They're not paying 3%. Usually they're paying 2%. And in contrast to the big home builders that know what they're doing are now paying 4 to 5% buyer agent commissions. Whereas these iBuyers that are just purchasing these properties from people, just normal people off market, and then doing some putting some lipstick on the pig and then listing it for $40,000, $50,000 more than they purchased it for. These properties are seeing price reductions, and I have some clients that could be candidates for some of these homes. And guess what? I'm not interested in showing them these homes because I don't want to personally work with an iBuyer. Now, if I have a client that is interested, I'm not going to not show them the home, and I'm not going to not put in an offer simply because I don't want to work with the iBuyer. That's not how I do my business. But if I have a client that is basically relying on me to find them the best home, I am very concerned about the work that these iBuyers do on these properties, and I'm also very concerned about actually getting to closing with these iBuyers because a huge percentage of their contracts fall through because of how difficult they are to work with. And so all that to be said, I'm seeing a ton of homes that are on the market right now that are just sitting and that have had multiple price reductions that are owned by these large investment iBuyer companies. And what's interesting, when I pull up those homes and then look at what the iBuyer bought them for, in some cases, the iBuyer, I can already see that they are already underwater. They have already, even if they sold it for what it's listed for, they would lose money. And you know what? I said this in my podcast when I talked about them a few months ago. I did not think their business model was sustainable. They raised all this money. They should just build more inventory rather than trying to flip houses. Flipping houses is not an easy thing to do, and the audacity that they thought that they could just do it by virtue of an algorithm and doing a bunch of things remotely, it just bothered me from the get-go. And you guys heard that in that episode where I talked about them. They should have just built houses. If they had all of that money, just do that. But anyway, I digress. They're going to have some pretty bad numbers to end the year, and so they're going to have to answer to their investors for that. And I already mentioned that we're seeing new home builders having to do tons of price reductions right now because they're getting stuck out in the cold with all these homes in these neighborhoods that are for sale. They're offering all sorts of incentives to move their properties. Meritage, a very big home builder in the area, they were offering realtors 2% buyer agent commissions a couple of months ago. They're offering 5% now. that's a massive difference in just a few months. And you know, they're hoping to get in good graces with buyer agents again. I'm not going to give my opinion on Meritage. I'll get in trouble if I do that. But let's just say, as a realtor, I don't appreciate when any sort of home builder just, you know, does that sort of nonsense with buyer agent commissions. All right, so what does all this mean? Here's just a few quick thoughts that I have in my head. Homes that have been on the market for a while obviously have some negotiating potential. I am thinking about this. If I am representing a buyer and they're interested in a home that's been on the market, I'm immediately thinking, okay, what kind of negotiation potential do we have here? Is it price? Is it closing costs? Is it maybe some of the terms? I suspect we'll see a big uptick in home sale contingencies. Those basically went away. We basically have not seen home sale contingencies for a couple of years. I think we're going to see a big uptick in those in the next couple of months as sellers can no longer be choosy. And we're already seeing lower due diligence termination fees. I discussed this again. I hate to keep saying I discussed this in previous podcasts, but I did. I discussed that the termination fee, which is what you pay if you back out during your inspection period, that's a negotiable item. And I said during a seller's market, it's very seller friendly. During a buyer's market, it's very buyer friendly. And right now what we're seeing is kind of, we've definitely seen it shift away from that seller's market number where people were offering insane termination fees. Now we're seeing those termination fee numbers much lower, so that a buyer, if a buyer backs out, they don't have to pay as much as they had to pay several months ago. So that's a major shifting point in the market. If we see those termination fees go all the way down to zero, meaning that generally speaking, a buyer can get under contract with the property and then back out without owing anything, that is when we know that we are entering something resembling, if not already, a buyer's market. Now, if I'm representing a buyer and we're looking at a home that's been on the market for several weeks, again, I am trying to get them as many concessions and as favorable of terms as possible. In the past, it was risky. It was risky to do that. You know, I would have clients the past couple of years, buyer clients, that would be like, hey Stan, do you think that the seller can pay for my closing costs? And it would be like, no, absolutely. You know, we'd be looking at a house that had, you know, already 5 cars lined up on it, and my client would be interested in the house, and they'd be like, do you think the seller will pay for closing costs? And the answer was no. The seller is not going to pay for your closing costs. They're going to have 15 offers on this house. They're going to accept the highest and best offer, and that's not going to be an offer that has the seller paying for the buyer's closing costs. Well, that's different now. And so now I'm shifting my approach with the times. We should be able to get sellers to pay for closing costs if that's what my clients want. If I'm representing a buyer, we should be able to see prices come down a bit off of what it's listed for. There's a lot of different things. Again, the due diligence period, how much a buyer potentially pays for the termination fee, that is a lot more negotiable now as well. So I'm trying to get these terms as favorable as possible for my buyer clients to give them the maximum ability to get what they want for the cheapest number possible. Of course, new construction has more negotiation potential than it has in a long time as well, as I've already mentioned. But builders are going to be more apt to give incentives rather than lowering the price. Because think about this. If you're looking at all the homes that have sold in a new construction neighborhood and you see that prices are going down, then that's bad for the neighborhood value as a whole. Builders want to keep those sales prices as high as possible, and they'd rather give a bunch of incentives. And usually what they want to do is not even so much incentives on like closing costs, but like upgrades to the house. So there's a lot of negotiating ability if you're looking at new construction to be able to get some upgrades to the house that you couldn't have gotten 6 months ago. And perhaps in addition to that, maybe have them pay closing costs, things of that nature. Purchase price, I suspect that home builders, like I just said, are going to try to hold the line as much as possible on the actual sales price. It's going to be more negotiating on some of these other things. Now, if I'm representing a seller, my pitch is the same as ever. Do not overprice your listing. You do not want to overprice. The market is shifting, but we are also, in addition to the market shifting, which is bad for sellers, we're also entering the slowest part of the real estate season. So this is also the time of year that prices seasonally kind of fluctuate and come down a little bit. You don't want to overprice your listing. Do not do it. If you list your home for sale and it lingers on the market, you have no idea what next year is going to hold. We could have a recession coming down the road. Who knows? You don't want to take that risk. Go ahead and list your property, list your house for a number that is definitely not overpricing it. Do not overprice it. I can't say that enough. And just be prepared if you're a seller that if you have to reduce the price on your home, that means you overpriced it, which is bad. But also, it's a strange market right now where we might look at the numbers and determine what the price is and think that we aren't overpricing it. But because 50% of people are having to reduce their prices right now, roughly speaking, you might find yourself in a situation where you have to reduce it anyway, just because the market has shifted so much that it's hard to actually even figure out what the correct price is in order to strike that sweet spot with the market. So just keep all of these things in mind as you look to sell your real estate. So we're seeing a lot of price reductions, and this is a trend that's going to continue, and we'll continue to monitor that as well as the other things. But in the meantime, I appreciate all you guys listening, and I appreciate every single one of you that has left this show a rating and a review. So if you can do that, please, if you're listening on the Apple Podcast app, typically what you have to do is you have to scroll down, you have to open up the show Selling Greenville, and you have to scroll down a little bit, and then eventually you'll see 5 stars. You just hit those 5 stars, and then write in a little review. Make sure you subscribe to the show as well. If you download episodes, that helps the show also. You can download them and then just immediately delete the download if you need more space on your phone. And as well, if you need any help with any of your real estate needs, my contact information is in the show notes. Appreciate you guys listening, and we will talk again next time.